Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks interesting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. And also one more thing before we get into the video, if you enjoy what I do here, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps me out and lets me know you enjoy the video. But with all that out of the way, let's get into that video. Okay, so to start painting our Mind Flayer sorcerer here from WizKids, we don't even need to prime, they already come pre-primed, but there is one thing I want to do first, and that is to detach the tentacle spell that he's using from the back of him so we can get full access to him. This is simple, it's nice and easy because it's just a little clip in there, so it's not too hard. And then what I want to do is I want to start off with the skin of our Mind Flayer here. So we're going with this dark purple contrast paint, and this is of course going to be for our base flesh. It's very dark. You can see here it probably looks almost off grey to nearly even black, especially in this sort of light. But you'll see as it slowly dries, it'll slowly become a little bit more purple. Then once we have that contrast paint dry, we're going to come in with our second contrast paint. We're going to use basilicanum grey for this. Now this is a very dark grey, almost black, and that's what I want. I want it to be just about black, but not quite black. Now you could totally go with black here if you want to give him, you know, that straight sort of evil cultist sort of look to him. I wanted to make it just a little bit lighter than that. It's still going to definitely read as black, but the reason why I'm doing this is I want to come in and use black for the spell effect that our sorcerer Mind Flayer is using here, because he's using Advard's black tentacles, I believe, is the spell he's producing behind him. So I want to make that the blackest thing on the model. So I want to make this just a little bit lighter so you can really tell that that's like a pitch ominous dark black. So that's why we're going with the basilicanum grey here. And of course, as you can see, I'm painting out all the robed areas. Now I'm not painting 100% of all of the robes. I'm leaving the sort of under robes. It's sort of a little hard to explain. As you can see, it's a little easy here with me showing, is that I'm leaving the sleeves and the very under part of our hooded robes here because I want to make them a completely different color. I didn't want to just make it dark and menacing and completely black. I want to give it a little bit of color in there, give it a little bit of vibrancy and add some mystical elements to him and make him look more like a sorcerer or a spellcasting wizard. So since we left out those parts for the underside of the robe, or the underneath parts of the robes where he has a sort of separation between his under robes and his over robes, this is the one I'm going to come in and use a different color. And for this I'm using ultramarine blue here, which is a nice dark blue for this. I thought that would be an interesting color to give to him. Like I said, I want to make him a mage, a magic user, a wizard. You know, I want to give him that feel, and I didn't want to just make him a simple dark plain cultist sort of look, which a lot of the Mind Flayers depicted. Also have interesting and vibrant colors, and I wanted to do that sort of thing. It would be very easy to just make them all sort of black and brown and call it a day there. I want to make it a little bit more interesting than that, so having little color choices like this can really help make a miniature pop on the table, especially since we're dealing with a Mind Flayer here. We want this to be a big bad guy in an encounter, and we want to really stick out on the table, and adding in those colors will really separate him out when you place him on the tabletop. So now we have our main base colors down with our contrast paint, and they're all nice and dry. What we're going to do is we're going to come in with the highlighting steps now. Now totally you could, if you want to make this a nice quick simple paint job, you go straight to the contrast paints and you can be done with it there. If you want to get the miniature out by, you know, that afternoon or that next day, you can really get that nice and easily quick to the tabletop. But of course we want to take that to the next level, and we want to add in some highlights there. Contrast paints are great for having as a base color and as your shadows and having for a little bit of highlights, but we also want to place highlights on top of them to really make them pop out and make those colors really stand out. And I've been using the technique for a little while and using contrast paints for giving them highlights and things over them to really just push them to the next level. And adding contrast paints can sort of save you a little bit of time with your base colors, because applying base colors can take a long time, and then applying a wash over top of that before you get started with highlights and things like that, it just cuts out a lot of that sort of time, and we wanted to get this thing onto the tabletop pretty quick. So that's why I'm going with the contrast paint here, and we're going with the highlights to really help elevate our contrast paint scheme. Now that we had our first layer of highlights done, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with faerzress purple, even a lighter purple again, almost a pinkish purple, and I'm going to use this for another round of highlights. I did this, I placed on the first layer of highlights we did in our last step, and I was like, oh, I could push this just a little bit further in certain places and really make certain areas really stand out a little bit more. And that's what I'm doing here with this purple, as I'm coming in and I'm just picking out things like the eyebrows, the very tops of the tentacles, the like knuckles, and the very raised veins of his claws on his fingers, just little areas like that. And I'm not using it like we did in the last step, but just smaller areas and just picking out certain places to really make those sort of highlighted areas pop. Then once we have that skin complete, we're going to move on to the robes now. And this one here I'm going to be using black grey for. Now this is sort of interesting, as our basilicanum grey is almost a black, but not quite, but it's a warm black. It's sort of got like a bit of brown and stuff in there. Whereas this highlight color I'm using here, this black grey, is sort of a cooler black. And it has a sort of different color to it. You probably can't really see it too well at the moment, but you'll see it when I move the camera around, and that it has sort of like a unique shine on it, and because it's a sort of cooler color, and I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting than sort of highlighting it up with, you could totally go with like a brown to more work with it, but I wanted to keep that sort of airiness and weird sort of appearance on him, and that's why I went with this sort of cooler grey to this, so when you look at it in the light, it gives off this sort of weird shine to the highlight. So that's what I was trying to go for here. Anyway, that's what, hopefully it'll come out well like I am intending it to, but that's one of the things we'll see as the steps go on. But totally what you can do here is progressively move up with lighter greys, and if you wanted to, you can start off with a black for the entire robes, missing the contrast paint step entirely if you weren't using contrast paint, and then just slowly progress by adding a little bit more white and get those greys up that little bit more. Then once we have all that complete, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come with ultramarines blue. Now I know the two different companies here within the contrast paint and then this army painter ultramarines blue. Blues are close and similar, but not quite the same. The ultramarines blue from army painter is just that little bit brighter, so it's going to be the perfect highlight for our areas. And because this miniature has some nice sculpted in highlights with the fabric and those raised ridges of where the fabric's flowing, we've got nice areas to pick out, and it's just going through and picking out those highlighted places. Then once we have all those highlights picked out, it's time to come in with a yellow, and we're going to use this for a nice delicate procedure on the mini, and that is of course painting in the eyes. I'm going to go with some nice bright vibrant yellow eyes to really stick out against everything that we've already painted on the model, and to also stick out of what we're also going to paint on the model. Just keep making that this sort of eye color here that I'm going with, this flat yellow, I'm going to make this the very sort of brightest color on the entirety of the mini, so you focus in on those eyes. And now we've picked out those eyes, we're going to come in with some red now, and this is to add some more color to the entirety of the piece. And he's got these nice like flowing bits of fabric coming off him, these nice little, he's got it like in a sash sort of tied around his waist, and they're all flowing off, and sort of like these typical sort of wizard and robe effects with these nice little tassely bits that can fly in the wind that have some really nice, awesome dynamic movement on miniatures and in artwork and stuff like that. So I wanted to come in with a different color for this, a nice bright vibrant color, and really add in some contrast to the whole piece, so you've got some interesting places to look over the entirety of the model, and that's why I went with red here. So it's just being mindful and careful, especially with all these areas where the miniature itself is so close together, but making sure that we can use our brush control to pick out those places. Then once we have those picked out, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with some burnt umber, and this of course is a brown, and we're going to use this to pick out the little straps that our Mind Flayer has on him. He has these nice little like tassels slash straps just dangling all over him, and I'm just making them plain sort of leather belts. As well as that too, we also want to concentrate with the leather belt that he has around his waist, that he has holding up that nice red sort of belt on him as well. So we got a little bit of color interest in there, but of course it's also a belt, so I'm just using some standard size brown. Any brown will do here to paint up all these little straps over the model. Then once we have that painted up, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with another contrast paint. This is Aggaros Dunes. This is a very sort of sepia color contrast paints and slash wash. Now if you didn't have Aggaros Dunes himself, you could easily use a sepia wash here to place over top of the pages of this book to make it look like old worn parchment. That's what I want to go for here. Now you can totally go with new pages and you can go with sort of a white paint job, but I want to make it an old gnarly looking book with really ancient tomes filled with these magic spells in here. So that's why I went with the contrast paint and give it that sepia tone to make it look more interesting. Then once we have those pages of the books painted up, what we're going to do now is I'm going to come in with some brassy brass. This here of course is a metallic paint, and what I'm going to do is on the end of his belt he has sort of like these nice little dangly bits of rings and metal on him, so I'm just going to go around the entirety of the model and pick out these, as well as that too, also sort of pick out the belt buckles. And one other thing I'm going to do with it too is he also has these little tassels draping down from the hood of his robe, sort of where the shoulder area is, got these nice little tassels on there as well. And I'm going to paint in the same brassy brass color and give it a nice little metallic effect over the entirety of the model. Just give it something more interesting to look at over the entirety of the piece. So just going around and picking out all those little bits. So now we have our Mind Flayer painted up here. What I'm going to do for the last step is I'm going to come in and paint his spell effect here. Now I believe it's supposed to be advanced black tentacles, so I want to of course paint it in that nice black color here, and to give it the nice interesting black oozy appearance that I want to try and go for here is I'm actually going to place a gloss varnish over top of this. So as you can see, I'm applying the black overall here, and it's got this nice interesting shine on it because the paint's nice and wet, and you give it that interesting oozy slick look for especially these little tentacles here. So that's what I want to try and replicate by adding a gloss varnish over top. You could totally, if you have a gloss black, you could probably just use that, but myself, I don't have a gloss black. All my paints are matte, so I don't have that sort of luxury, so adding a gloss varnish will do the exact same thing as well as sort of protect the model. So with all that now, we have finished painting up the model, so let's go into those glamour shots and see how it came out, shall we? And there you have it, everyone. With all that complete, we have finally finished painting up our Mind Flayer sorcerer from the Dungeons & Dragons range by WizKids. So I hope this video has been interesting for you, whether you want to paint up as I did here, or you just want to use the videos from inspiration in painting up your own miniatures. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video.